There are no shortcuts to getting highly coveted press coverage for your brand, only smart cuts like the DIY PR project. Learn how to grow your brand's credibility with PR on a budget with me by your side. This program is your all-in-one membership with expert training, customizable templates, and a supportive community to cheer you on every step of the way. Join us and start growing your business with free publicity today. Sign up now at diy-pr.com. Welcome back to Grow Your Wealth. I'm your host, Rena Goodwin, and today's episode is all about creativity, resilience, and navigating the art world. Joining me is Emily Keating Snyder, a New York-based artist whose stunning work blends the tradition of embroidery with modern abstract painting. Emily's unique approach brings craft into the world of fine art, creating minimalist, textural pieces that have captured the attention of brands like Anthropologie, Real Simple Magazine, and Parachute Home. In this episode, Emily shares her journey as an artist, the challenges she's faced in the art world, and how she's overcome feelings of inadequacy to build a thriving career. We also explore the emotional and therapeutic power of creating, the value of mentorship for emerging artists, and the time management strategies for balancing creativity with the demands of running a business. Whether you're an artist, entrepreneur, or simply someone looking for inspiration to follow your passions, this conversation will leave you feeling uplifted and ready to take on the world. Let's dive in. Emily, welcome to the Grow Your Wealth podcast. It's so nice to have you today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I am so excited to, Emily, I worked in an art museum for a number of years. And interestingly enough, it was actually one of the more stressful jobs that I've had. And I think that a lot of people would be surprised to hear that, especially you being an artist yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience as an artist? I know that you've described yourself being an artist for as long as you can remember. How did those early experiences really shape your approach to art today?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that, when I graduated from college with an art history degree, and at the time, I can get back into the psychology of this, but at the time I kind of always knew I wanted to be a professional artist, but I really didn't have the confidence to say, this is what I'm doing. And so I thought, I'll just major in art history. I'll get a job in a gallery. I'll be behind the scenes. And it is, the New York art world especially is very challenging. So I can imagine what the art museum world is like. It's just very intense. But so growing up, I was always an artist, and it would manifest in different ways. Like I would do traditional painting and drawing. Like my parents would, try to encourage me and set me up with drawing classes and stuff like that. But I would get kind of burnt out after a little while of like trying to draw realistically, and I would just go home and make little like Barbie houses out of cardboard and paint them and things like that. My parents were really supportive. Anything around the house that was like wood or just anything that I could paint, they'd be like, sure, go paint it. And I would like just decorate everything. So I did a lot of like, a mix of crafting and fine art. I was always really into embroidery, actually, which I obviously incorporate into my work today. Just kind of everything arts and crafts. And I feel like especially getting into college studying art and then, coming into the real world and in the art world, it's like over time, as you get more quote unquote serious about art, the kind of craft kind of has to go away, and you kind of have to like draw more of a delineation between the two. And I just didn't want to do that. And so I think, early in my practice as an adult, I just started finding ways to incorporate my love of photography. I was actually much more into photography when I kind of first got out of college. So I would do what I've seen a lot of artists do, as well as incorporate embroidery into photographs, and just like play with different ways to bring it together.
That's amazing. So you studied art history in New York and Florence, which is pretty darn fabulous. You live in New York City now, which is arguably the art capital of the United States. I know a little bit about your world, but not too much. For those that are listening that are artists or, are ambitious in terms of wanting to be an artist, creatives at heart, this is a tough field to be in, right? Because when you think about growing a business, we often talk about businesses that thrive or businesses that either take away a pain or get us closer to some sort of pleasure, right? And I think that we can argue for sure that art is usually on the latter side of things. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that we enjoy. But when you are, kind of quote unquote competing with, 1,000 other artists, what is it that helps you kind of stand out among the rest?
That's a good question. I think it's been an interesting trajectory for me because I think I kind of entered the kind of working world at this weird time, like right as gallery, like in-person galleries were still thriving, which many still are, but it was like that was kind of the only way to buy art.
Mhm.
And then shortly thereafter, like Instagram started being a thing, and artists could have their own websites and their own Instagram, and start selling their own work. So I've kind of been able to like learn as I go and figure that out. But in terms of standing out, I think what's kind of cool, it's a double-edged sword. Like what's hard about selling art is, yes, it doesn't necessarily serve a tangible function. It is more for emotional and kind of entertainment and luxury purposes. But what separates it, I think, from other products is that even if someone is doing something similar to you, you're never like really in competition directly with anyone. Like if two brands are both selling smartphones, it's like they're kind of selling the same thing. They have to keep in competition and outdoing each other with new features. But in art, it's like there's no way to put a tangible label on what someone will respond to in your art. So you could say an art collector is looking for like, oh, I love colorful abstract art, and you could show them 5 artists and they could not respond to 4 of them and be obsessed with the 5th one. So I think it's this hard thing of like, being in business, you want to kind of see what your audience likes and definitely support that a little bit. Like I'll notice like, oh, people really respond to this style I'm doing and I really enjoy it. I would never just, make something that I hate, just to get people on board. But I'll notice like, oh, people are responding to this. I like it. I'm going to make more of this. So I think it's a balance of like seeing what's working, what people enjoy and what people like to buy, and then not being afraid, which I think is easier said than done, to be in your own unique voice. Because sometimes I'll be like, oh, I really want to do this, but it's a little out there, or I don't know what people will think. And it's like, in order to stay unique and stand out from other people, you have to just fully do your own thing, like be yourself.
Oh,
As like common as that sounds.
no, I think that that's so important, and that kind of reminds me too, right? Like your personal brand is so important, right? When building your professional brand, do you find that the two are linked in your business? Like, if you're buying an Emily Snyder piece, it's almost like an extension of yourself that you're putting into your work.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's especially true with art. And I kind of fought that for a while. I think a lot of artists and creatives are probably introverts as well, or don't love being in the spotlight. So for years I would just kind of put my art out there. Like I would maybe have like one little picture of myself on my website. I would never show myself on Instagram. And then as I started just getting out of my comfort zone a little bit and showing like more of me making art, but also like me going to my favorite coffee shop on the weekend or something like that, just like little ways for people to get to know you. I think it makes a huge difference, because art is so personal. It's I think that that relationship is probably more important in selling art than in a lot of other industries.
I can absolutely see that. And something about your art that really stands out to me is that it just feels so fresh. like the bold colors, I think, especially these days, is so welcome. And, I work with a lot of interior designers, and for years now, it's been like, very neutral, very minimal. I think things have been slowly starting to come back to kind of more this maximalist type design. But tell me a little bit about like your style, right? Like what really speaks to you and what you put into your work. Would love to hear from your perspective, what kind of makes your art unique in that way.
Yeah, I think like I always just joke that my brain is just because I grew up in the 90s is just full of like Lisa Frank and Nickelodeon and it's just like all those colors are like implanted in my brain. Um yeah, I could say like so much about this, but yeah, I've just always been um even as a kid, I feel like very aware of how our spaces make us feel and how you can tell, when you walk into a room and it just doesn't feel welcoming or, the colors are off, it just doesn't make you feel great. And some people like, I think there's absolutely a place for like neutral space. Like all my walls are totally white in my home. And I love having this like a calm space to come home to. But in my art, I just love like being happy because yeah, like things, and I think that can be misinterpreted of like, oh, this person must just be happy all the time and that's why their art is so happy. And sometimes I think it came out of like times when I wasn't feeling so great or times that have been harder, and the working with colors is just like my therapy. So yeah, I wanted to say one more thing about that, but I can't remember. But that's okay. Yeah, so I just think just really tuning into like the emotions of color is really big for me. Oh, I remembered what I was going to say. And it's funny because I grew up on the East Coast. I went to school in New York, lived here for a few years, and then I actually just moved back here. I had lived in LA for about 10 years. And so I feel like when I was there, it was very like, oh, like, of course you have bright colors. You're in Southern California. And in New York, I really stand out because people are like, where did you come from with this? Because it's, things are like a little more like muted and, neutral here. So it's kind of fun to see how different like places and cultures respond to color also.
Absolutely. I think I am on board with that mentality. I lived in New York for a number of years as well too. I'm that person that wears a lot of toned down colors and so forth. So when I see work like yours, I feel like it's yeah, it does feel really uplifting and happy. I mean, let's actually kind of take the conversation in that direction as well too. Speaking about mental health, I always think to myself, I'm not an artist. Let's just be very clear. I am not an artist, but if I feel like if I was an artist, that would be such an incredible, just such an incredible practice in terms of grounding yourself, spending time with yourself, with your thoughts, right? I can only imagine it would be somewhat challenging to create art and stare at your phone, for example,
Right.
at the same time. Do you consider art to be like a therapy for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. It's something that like you said, like I've just done art all my life, and I didn't really see that as like different. Like I thought that was totally normal until I remember getting into college, and I wasn't a studio art major, and I was like, oh, like how come I can't just take an art class every semester? And I realized like that's not, growing up, I was lucky to live in a school district where it was like everyone takes an art class. So like as I got older, I was like, oh, this is not everyone is just making art all the time. And yeah, I think looking back, it's definitely like even before I knew anything about meditation or mindfulness, like it was always my mindfulness time when I could get into that flow state, which is the best feeling in the world. And yeah, I think it's challenging being a professional artist because you have to balance like getting into your studio zone and just blocking out the world and making art and getting in your zone. And then other days you have to be responding to email and editing Instagram reels and stuff like that, which can take you out a little bit. So yeah, being able to come back to that like quiet space and just kind of like in a way process emotions and process thoughts kind of subconsciously. Like I'm not always thinking necessarily about a problem or whatever, but I can go into my art space, clear my head for a little bit, and I feel like calmer at the end, which is, yeah, such a gift to have.
Absolutely. Emily, do you have help? By the way, do you have like an assistant? Do you have a team, or are you a one-woman show?
That's a good question. I'm a one woman show for now. Yeah, I'm doing, yeah, pretty much everything. I have I definitely like rely on other people in the sense that I know what I don't know, and so I have hired many times like a Pinterest expert to teach me Pinterest, or a coach to help with mindset. So I kind of have yeah, almost like advisors in different departments.
Oh, that's so smart. So, in addition to having those advisors, what other sort of tips and tools do you leverage in terms of maximizing your time day to day? Because it's tough when you're the one that is focused on delivery, client relations, marketing, content creation, all of the things, right?
Yeah.
How do you balance the day to day juggle?
Yeah, it's been an ongoing process, and just when I feel like, okay, I've nailed down the perfect routine, then like I start another project or something changes, and I'm like, okay, I gotta figure it out again. But I'm not great at this, is like always what I'm trying to do. But I find that the times when I work the best, whether it's the marketing and admin or the art, is when I'm just doing that for the day.
Mhm.
Like there are days when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna paint for a couple hours, and then I'm gonna, um, you know, do some administrative thing in the afternoon. I just get kind of frazzled, and so really trying to delineate days where it's like these 2 days are just studio days this week. I'm not gonna even check my email. I'm just gonna get in there and make things. So that I find really helps. And the other thing is like I feel like this is very common for people to say, but it really helps is batching. So if you're like, rather than scrambling to make a bunch of Pinterest pins every week, it's like once a month or maybe twice a month, I'll make a big batch of them and schedule them and tailwind. So that kind of thing. And then, and actually I should, I should give credit. Where I do outsource, which is amazing, is I sell a lot of prints of my art, and I have like a printing studio. They're called G Clay today. I think a lot of artists use them, and they actually, I just say like, hey, this person ordered this print, and they print it and ship it and package it beautifully. So a lot of that is taken care of, which is amazing. So a lot of it is just, on my computer. And of course, I work with 2 brick and mortar galleries and a couple of online galleries that are amazing for selling my work as well. So, so I do have kind of like, again, these like little pockets of people helping me out, which is great.
That's amazing. And something that you said I can totally relate to, and I think is so smart, going back to what you mentioned about batch working and honestly time blocking. I remember not in the distant past that there was a study from Stanford University that had shared context switching is truly robbing us of not just time, but energy. And context
Mm-hmm.
switching meaning kind of jumping from different tasks to different tasks. So jumping from a meeting to marketing to admin to writing to painting, whatever that looks like. And rather than kind of bouncing back and forth, focusing our time on one thing at a time, which, going back to what you said about growing up in the 90s, our generation was definitely taught like the harder you work, the more that you multitask, like the farther that you'll get ahead in life. And
Oh yeah.
unfortunately, for so many of us, it's actually starting to lead to burnout, right? Because it's like if the time is not blocked, as entrepreneurs, we're gonna fill that time, right? We're gonna find something
Yeah.
to fill that time with. How do you protect your time, Emily, in that way, right? Like I'm sure you've got these large blocks of time kind of kind of blocked off, but are there practices that you observe to kind of protect your personal time as well?
Yeah, this is so interesting. I was actually just talking to a friend last night about this, who's um, also a New Yorker and has worked in like very intense jobs. And we were, I think, kind of the main thing I want to say about this is that as we're like kind of getting into that, transitioning into that world where more and more people are realizing like, oh, multitasking is not only not that productive, but it's kind of working against you. And, not just in your productivity, but obviously in your mental health and well-being, that we're kind of still, especially in, intense environments, we're kind of going against the grain. And so a lot of it is just, I try to remember to kind of surround myself with people and resources, whether it's like articles or YouTubers or Instagrammers who are like on the same page as me, because it's so easy to just be surrounded by the normal conditioning of everyone being like, wake up at 6 a.m., like work out, do this, go there, get it all done, and multitask. And like, if you're trying to do something different from that, it's like, it's going to suck you back in. So like the biggest part of my practice is just reminding myself like, oh, okay, like it is safe for me to do one thing at a time. Like, not only am I like allowed to, but secretly it's much better. So yeah, I feel like a lot of the practice is just like, is kind of like a permission thing, which is sad, because it's like, it seems kind of silly to have to like remind yourself like it's okay to take care of yourself and to sleep 8 hours, because we're kind of told like you're not going to get it all done if you do that. But yeah, and one resource that I really like, you've maybe heard of him, is Cal Newport. He, I think his main field is kind of like this idea of deep work, which is what you're talking about, where you kind of like set a timer for 4 hours, you go in and you do one thing, and you will do that thing so much better than if you try to do it, over the course of 5 days while you're also like checking email and, doing whatever else you're doing. So I feel like, yeah, coming back to that. And then I would say the way a lot of people say this, but I think it's totally true. Like the way I start my day, like absolutely sets the tone for how the rest of the day is going to go. Because it's like the days where I'm like, I'm feeling good. I get up, go into my little space and do my meditation and my journaling, and I don't open my phone. I am so much more clear-headed. I make a plan for the day. It all gets done. And then there are the days when I'm like, oh, what if I just like look at Instagram real quick at 7:30 in the morning, and then like 3 hours have passed and I haven't really gotten anything done. So I think just like, yeah, like starting out the day is like your key time to take advantage of that.
I could not agree more, and easier said than done some days too, right?
Oh yeah.
But all of us I think would absolutely kill for like an extra hour a day, right? And when we actually take stock of where we are spending our time, we can probably find an extra hour a day, right? Like when I sometimes get those screen reports on Sunday afternoon from my iPhone, that tells me, my average amount of screen time throughout the week. I'm like, oh, why?
Yeah, and you're
Why?
always like surprised. You're like, what? I didn't think I was doing that. So much of that this week, but
A
yeah.
100%. But so you notice a big difference when you start your day in a way that is like technology free. That's really making a date with yourself, right? And kind of
Yeah.
honoring that quiet time and time of self-reflection.
Yeah, and again, I think it's like some of it comes from just anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I better, like, I know this person was going to get back to me. I should like make sure and check my email so I get back to them right away. And then kind of reminding myself like, it's okay. Like the world's not going to end if I read this email in 2 hours. And yeah, I think just having that like quiet time, again, is like a permission slip to be like, um, again, just like working against like our conditioning of like, can I am very fortunate. Like I don't have kids right now. I work for myself. And so I do have, the luxury of like timing out my schedule in the morning. And sometimes I will just like sit and look out my window and like drink coffee for like half an hour. And it's like this weird thing where you're like, that seems wrong. Like I shouldn't do that. And it's like, but why is that wrong? That's crazy. Like, why am I judging myself for that? Because it does also help me be more productive later in the day.
Oh, so true, right? And I can completely relate to that. Like, what should I be doing right now? What could I be doing right now? And I think some of that can be certainly self-inflicted, and some of that can really just be, look around the room, like that proverbial room of others in our industry or others that we look up to just seem like they're always moving forward, making it happen. But sometimes we forget that standing still can help us move forward, right? Because we're alone with those thoughts. We're able to have clarity of mind and really brainstorm. Like, I don't know about you, but like sometimes my I'm always thinking about like the next big thing for my business, for my life. And I don't get that scrolling through social, that, because that's
Yeah.
other people's versions of like their next big thing, their best life, not mine. And so who knows, right? Like that 30 minutes in the morning alone with a coffee could be, your next big business idea or next big art
Yeah.
breakthrough, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like, it's almost like a joke, but I really do get my best ideas in the shower because I'm not like trying to do anything. It's like, I'm just like not even thinking about work. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And I, get out and write it down. So yeah, it's always like surprising how that works out.
Totally. I remember people saying that and saying like, "Oh, I was thinking about this in the shower." My first knee-jerk reaction was thinking like, "Oh, you like are overthinking things." I'm like, "No, you're actually like you've had a clear mind. That's why you get your best
Yeah.
ideas like in the shower, on a walk, what have you." So, I absolutely love that. Emily, I know that you also work with clients of your own too as an artist. What are your clients struggling with and how do you help them?
Yeah, so I feel like, as I was trying to figure out, how to be an artist for a long time, I just, there were people who I was able to reach out to or learn from just by seeing what they were doing. But in a lot of ways, it's such a uncharted path. Like there's just no, clear, direct like way to be an artist. So I just always thought like when I figure out how to do this, like I want to help other artists, like, because you can feel like so alone. So what's been really nice is, yeah, helping other artists. And I feel like seeing a lot of the challenges that they express to me are like the same things I've felt in the past, or sometimes things that I still feel that, don't really ever go away. But a lot of it is, again, like not, there are so many ways to market our art, which is really exciting. I mean, it is very different than it would have been like 20 or 30 years ago for an
Mm.
artist. Like we have so many more opportunities. But it can be really overwhelming to be like, what should I be doing? There's only so many hours in the day. Should I be on Instagram? Should I be reaching out to interior designers? Like, I don't know what to do with my time. So I think that's a big challenge, is like where, because, the artists I work with are very committed to their practice and committed to growing. So they want to like put in the work and do things. They're just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think kind of like directing people of like, here's how you can spend your time to get the most impact. Yeah, and then I think the other thing is just a mindset thing of being, having a certain amount of confidence in their work, but also sometimes questioning like, oh, I want to apply to this gallery, but am I good enough? Or I have these pieces, but maybe I should make new ones. Maybe they would like those better. Kind of like second guessing sort of what people will respond to.
That is so interesting because I don't get that in my job because working in PR, our clients don't really see the work that goes in. They see, in other words, they see the outcome, not the
Mm-hmm.
output, so to speak. But that's a really interesting perspective that you bring in terms of, your livelihood is really based on that outcome, right? Like that piece
Mm-hmm.
of art and the struggle that so many emerging artists must feel, especially when they're like, this is what I got. Like, is it good enough? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I hate the words imposter syndrome, but for lack of a better phrase, like, is that what we're talking about here? Just this feeling of like not being good enough or not, giving the market what they want or need.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's definitely something that like I feel a lot. The imposter syndrome thing. Yeah, however you want to talk about it. Um, but yeah, and then I think sometimes it's like kind of just not knowing what a gallery owner is looking for or like what a designer is looking for. So yeah, and a little like there's like a little bit kind of multi facets to it of like a little bit of just like uncertainty about kind of putting yourself out there and showing your work and being like afraid. And then some of it I think is just like, I have all this art. I know there are people who will like it, but I don't know like exactly which people or like,
Mm.
this gallery has this style, like, will I fit in, that kind of thing. And a lot of that just comes from, well, like what I've learned the long, hard way is that a lot of that just comes from like testing of being like, as I'm sure you understand from like the PR and marketing world, it's like you start out and you're like, okay, like I'm selling art, it's this price. I guess I'm looking for people who like art who want to spend this amount of money. And it's like, that's actually a huge net. And you have to, over time, maybe you submit to one gallery or, you submit to 3 galleries and 2 of them say no and 1 of them says yes. And you start to realize like, oh, okay, like this is kind of maybe my audience, like the kind of people who like this more specific type of art or whatever. So it's just like the process. And I think actually kind of what ties those 2 things together of like the like emotional kind of, is this good enough? And also the logical, like, who is my audience? It's kind of like, I always think of actors also where, you are getting a lot of like rejection, but I never think of it that way. It's similar to like auditioning. I think of like, I've submitted my work to so many galleries and shows and online platforms and gotten crickets a lot of times, or like people will write back and say, not for us, or sometimes not for us right now. And then I email them a year later and it works out. But I think it's about kind of taking the emotion out and realizing like, even though it can be painful, like they're not rejecting you, it's just not the right fit. And it's the same for actors. It's like, if you don't get cast in something, it's not because you're a bad actor, it's because they're looking for like this person who's like a little bit different vibe for this role or whatever. It's just people trying to like, find a match.
I couldn't agree more. And honestly, I relate to this even as a publicist as well. There was this funny infographic on Instagram that I shared once, and it was like, the life of somebody who is like me that pitches all day long. And it's like, you'll hear no, 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 until you finally get that yes, right? And that yes
Yep.
makes everything so worth it. And I think in many ways too, it probably helps not just develop that market fit that you so desperately want to understand, but resiliency as well too. Like that's life. You were all going to hear no many, many times, but something that I've also kind of taken with me is that no also doesn't mean never. It just means like
Yeah.
not right now. Have you had an experience where maybe you were let down in some capacity, whether it be with a gallery, a distributor, some kind of opportunity, and then it ended up turning out for the positive?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the big one that comes to mind that I always reassure the artists that I talk to with is one of the brick and mortar galleries that I work with, who I love, Greg Irby Gallery in Atlanta. I've been like following them on Instagram forever. I just like loved all the art they share, and their team is really great. And I had submitted my art I'm like losing track of time, but a few years ago, and I think at the time it was like, yeah, like not for us, not now, or whatever. And I was kind of like, okay, like that's okay. I'll just keep going, keep at it. And I think I emailed them again maybe nine or 12 months later, with a new, not totally different, but like new artwork that I had made in a slightly different style maybe. And it just hit, right place, right time. And they were like, sure, we'd love to work with you. And now I've been working with them for years, and, we have a really great partnership. So yeah, I think that's a big thing, is like, just keep going. Actually, I have just kind of like a silly anecdote that keeps me going, is like, this is one of those things that's like probably a game of telephone. Who knows if like these are the exact facts, but I'm like a big comedy person. And I remember some comedian telling this story about how Jay Leno, like when he was like super early on, like just doing like open mic nights, there was like an open call for something, and he was literally waiting in this really long line to go into like a casting or audition or something. And the line was so long that people would like just keep stepping out and being like, oh, I'm over this, like I'm getting out of line. And it was such a metaphor for like, all you have to do is stay in line, like just keep going. Like just don't walk out. Like if you just keep going, like you'll eventually get where you need to go.
Wow. It's so true, right? Because
Yeah.
like, I mean, how many of us have been the ones that have been waiting in that line ourselves? And every time someone steps out, you're like, yes.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like I'm one person closer now.
yes, 100%. And going back to that notion of resiliency, right? Like strengthening that muscle of patience. And I know that you have been doing this a long time, but you've had some serious career boosters, it seems, as well too. You've collaborated with Parachute, with Anthropologie. I mean, like this is like wish list for
Yeah.
artists. Could you tell us about how you were able to secure such incredible partnerships?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I love talking about stuff like this. So it's kind of funny because some of it, like I've found this to be true in a lot of aspects of my work. Is I will, I've cold emailed a thousand a thousand emails. I still do it. I email interior designers. I email like art consultants, bloggers, content creators, and so I've put in a lot of hours of doing that, and sometimes that has come back with great opportunities, and sometimes it's almost like this weird thing of like I've put in the emails to these people, and then out of the blue this person I hadn't even contacted contacts me, and so I think it's just overall, I just want to say, like, I feel like that's kind of the mix of like the secret to all of this is like going in, doing the work, like sharing your work, contacting who you need to contact, and then being like really open to things coming out of the blue, because that will totally happen also. And I think the more you're like aware and kind of like keeping your eye open for opportunities, like the more they will come. But so, yeah, like one good example is I had one of my paintings was featured in someone's like a house tour on or in Real Simple magazine, and it was through when I lived in LA. There was this amazing like co-working space for women run by Danny Nagel, and her brand is Daisy. It's like a clothing brand, and she does a lot of different things. She's also a content creator, and so I just like loved her space, and I was like, can I just hang my art in your space? Like, you don't have to buy it. I just want to hang it there. And like, as like, people will come in and see it. And so, yeah, so she agreed to that. And then she ended up selling some of my small paintings on her website, and she had the samples in her own home, which is like beautiful, colorful, like she's amazing style. And that was then featured in Real Simple. And so it was kind of like kind of a roundabout way of like not always needing to necessarily like go out and try to get the end result, but sometimes it's just like building the relationships will end up bringing things to you also. So that was really cool. And then I'm trying to think about, Parachute. So I did, they had like a blog feature where they would do kind of makeovers, like home makeovers for celebrity homes. And one of the designers working on one of those had found me actually through, I think through a hashtag, like on Instagram. I had posted something, tagged it. I think it was like the Domino magazine hashtag or something, and she found me. So it's weird because it's like, how many times have I thrown a hashtag on a post and it's just like gone into the ether, and that post hasn't gotten anything. And then there are these things where like sometimes it's like you're 1 out of 100 times you do something, like the right person sees it, and I think that's great. And then my last example, I guess, would be of someone I did reach out to and pursue, this amazing YouTuber, Alexandra Gator. She's now like a YouTube star. She does also like home makeovers, but a lot of times for like studio apartments and rentals. And I started watching her channel just like for fun as a viewer years ago when she had, I don't know, maybe like 10,000 subscribers or something. And I was just obsessed with her. And I was like, I just feel like our style is so similar. And so I just said like, hey, can I send you one of my art prints? I didn't even say like, will you use it in a video? Will you share it on Instagram? I was just like, can I send you something for free, period? And she was like, yes. And then she ended up using that print in a video, and like, she is just blown up. She's huge now. And I'm really fortunate that like every few months we collaborate. She'll have me make an original or a print to use in one of her videos. And one of my paintings was on the cover of her first book she released like a year or two ago. So it was like,
wow,
just an example of like, you never know, because I think we have our eye on like, I gotta be on the cover of Architectural Digest. And sometimes it's like, just like find those like organic relationships of like someone else who's maybe starting out and you don't know like where you could end up growing together.
Oh, I love this because that gets a little bit into PR and partnerships, which I love. So just to kind of recap what you said, so you've been able to secure some incredible opportunities, being included in Real Simple magazine, celebrated by YouTube stars, content creators, etc., just by simply reaching out, introducing yourself, and offering something like a print or a piece of art, and not necessarily even asking for anything in return, right?
Yeah, that was advice. I'm really lucky. I have a friend from college who is like she has her own like social media and like kind of brand relationship business. And someone had said like a couple of years ago, like, oh, you should try like working with influencers. And I was like, okay, I don't know how to do that. And so I just emailed, I was like, hey, how do I do this? And she was like, you can just, she kind of just gave me that advice. She was like, reach out, at the time it was like, try starting with people who have under 10,000 followers, because they usually have higher engagement and they're often like more willing to do things for free.
Yeah.
And she was like, you don't even have, like, you can ask like, hey, would you be willing to share this in an Instagram post or something? But she was like, people send me stuff and even if they don't ask, like I almost always share it on my social media just because it's, kind of a nice thing to do. And so, yeah, that was great advice.
I love that advice, and something that I share, with our clients at Factor PR as well too, is that this is really the difference between building a good reputation through public relations versus something like marketing. Like we often say in PR is really about giving. Marketing is really about asking, right? Like I'm asking for your email, your sale, your sign up, whatever that might look like. And PR is really about giving your expertise, samples of your work, a taste of who you are. And that can definitely come back to serve you immediately, but it also might take time in the future as well. And I love that has also probably created a lot of leverage for you, right? So that you have sort of this track record of like, I've been here, I've been featured there, I've worked with these folks so that you can, kind of amass this credibility in your work and this buy-in in your work that you can kind of go after some bigger opportunities. Is that something on your radar that you're working on as we speak?
Yeah, definitely. That's a good question. Or a good way to put it. Yeah, I think just the first thing I would say is like yeah, I totally agree that it's really about relationship building. I think especially for me because I am, I have two sides. Like I can be like outgoing and say like, here's my art, like, and get all excited about it. But I am pretty introverted, and so the idea of like pitching a big publication and being like, here's my art, here's why you should feature it, all this stuff, like, is just not as appealing to me. I mean, I still do it sometimes, but like as just being like, oh my gosh, like this YouTuber or this blogger, like I just love their work so much, and I just genuinely want to like get into their world and talk to them and see what we can do together. And yeah, but I feel like moving forward, I go through phases where sometimes I'm really good about being like, okay, I'm gonna make a plan. I'm gonna, get some samples together and reach out to these publications or these bloggers. And then sometimes I won't do that for a few months, and I'm like, I should really should really do more of that. But yeah, moving forward, I think the plan is definitely, like you said, to show like, okay, I have this track record of, publications and people featuring my work, and obviously people are responding to it. And so yeah, kind of starting to go after more opportunities.
That's awesome. And your work is, oh my God, just so spectacular and so
Oh, thank you.
beautiful. Do you create your work like in sort of collections or in seasons, or how does that work? Is it commissioned, or when the inspiration hits you, do you get working? What is that process like for you too?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was like clear cut one of those things, but I think it's the kind of thing where I have the intention to work in collections, and I mostly do. I'll do like every few months. Like I said, I work with some galleries, and then I also sell originals on my website. So I will try to make like a set of paintings for one gallery, and then maybe a couple months later make a collection of art to sell on my website. But then yeah, sometimes it's like, oh, I just have this idea, I gotta get going with it, and so I'll get in and make a bunch of work, and then just kind of see like, okay, does this work for this gallery? Do I want to release it on my website? So yeah, I feel like I have gotten into more like cohesive collections over time, and then I do commissions as well, which is really fun, and those can come at any time. So sometimes it's like a one-off, like kind of one small piece. Sometimes it's like if it's for a hotel or something, it'll be like 10 pieces, and that kind of like
Ooh.
takes over for a few weeks or a couple of months where like I'm not doing as much new work. So yeah, it's just really like going with the flow, however it comes up.
That's amazing. I have one more question if you've got a few more minutes, Emily.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so if you could give one piece of advice to our listeners about building a creative practice, one that brings joy and fulfillment to your life, not just to your business, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is, which I mentioned earlier, is this is specifically like if you want your creative practice to be your business and your professional life as well, is hitting that balance of what you want to make and what other people want to buy, frankly. And it's hard to do because, as an artist, it's like your ideas come from wherever the heck they come from, and you're often like in your own bubble. But I personally believe that if you are a creative person, you're probably not meant to just do that creative thing just for you. Like we all want to see the movies and the paintings and hear the songs that other people are creating. And so I think being able to, and this I'm sure is like a lifelong practice because I still have not mastered it, of like, again, being able to see like, oh, people really respond to this style and I really like making it. I'm going to make more of those. And I think some people could read that as like kind of cynical of like, oh, well, you're just like, pandering to whatever sells and you're just making more of that. But I almost think of it as like this cool, like back and forth dialogue of like, oh, like a conversation of like, oh, I put this thing out there and other people are responding to it. And let me see if I can take that and put a new twist on it and put something else out. And just kind of, like going back and forth with like what you want to express and what people want to receive. Because at the end of the day, like it's great. There are some things that I've, tons of things that I've made that have never seen the light of day that I do make for myself. There are some things that I've made that only like close friends have seen. And then there are things that I want almost like to provide for like other people to be able to enjoy. And so I think it's balancing those two things.
That is so, so smart, right? Like, who out there is setting out to be a starving artist, right? You're setting out to be an artist that, finds that balance between passion, purpose, and even profit, right? You got to make money in order to stay in business. So that's really, really good. It's just overall business advice, Emily. Thank you for that. Where can people find you and find your beautiful artwork?
Yeah. So my website is emilykeatingsnyder.com, and I'm on Instagram at mksnyder, EMKSNYDER. I am on TikTok, but I don't post there very often, and on Pinterest. And so my art is on my website. And then I also, as you said, offer mentorship for other artists, which can be found on my website too.
That's tremendous. Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode deposited some useful advice and insights to help you grow your wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future conversations. You can find more resources, episode details, and updates at growyourwealthpodcast.com. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram. Follow me at Grow Your Wealth Podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or takeaway from today's show. Until next time, remember, burnout is optional. Take care, and I'll see you next week.